So what's the best video game moment of 2020? Well, in a year where we've all been inside, as you've all heard probably a billion times, probably in this video, games have been like the one escape, and I'm weirdly picking one that really wasn't escape, one that was kind of hard on the soul. I didn't spoil it last time I mentioned it, and all the goblins got upset because it's the best spoiled game in the world. Well, now I'm gonna spoil it, and the best video game, well, it's the best game of the year, but the best video game moment of the year is the museum section in The Last of Us Part 2. A flashback, because spoilers again, if for anyone who hasn't even been spoiled or haven't played it yet, Joel gets his head bashed in, and we lose him very early on. So it was a very different game, and to see Ellie going through all the sort of like pain and struggle of like revenge, and we don't know yet why all of this has happened, really. But to have a flashback and have Joel and Ellie like sort of like one more time back in the sort of like the good days before the dark times, it was so pleasant to see, and there was a bunch of nice references to things like Jurassic Park. Which also got memed to hell. Putting a hat on Joel, nice little trophy there. Also, just a nice moment. Use that little picture of Joel as your WhatsApp group icon. We did it at one point because Joel was good. Joel was good, but was he actually good? It's really up to your sort of debate, isn't it? But for me, it has to be just the whole going through the museum and Ellie seeing these dinosaur skeletons for the first time and being exposed to something different, really. And just both performances there were fantastic, and just to hear Troy Baker one last time, but in a sort of like a different setting, and not having his head bashed in or his knee shot off. And as we get to the end section, Ashley Johnson just is so perfect as Ellie at the end, where they come to the space section, they run through some of the sort of planets and satellites, and she gets to sit in, I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's one of the landing crafts from a rocket ship, and imagine that she's going to space because Joel has gone out there and got a recording of a rocket launch back before the world was screwed, and just Joel handing that over to Ellie, that tape recording, watching her listen to it, and the excitement has been building and we've all been there giddy, like on a birthday or Christmas, like getting the one thing we've ever wanted sort of thing. And Ellie, this is something she didn't know she wanted and something she didn't know she'd ever experience, and sitting through that and just listening to her experience it, watching her experience it. It's one of the like the magical moments in games, and just like it does sort of harken to what we could have had in this game, but it's also nice that we did get some of this sort of like exploration, should I say, of their sort of relationship. And it's just such a nice moment. And that's it. The sitting in a part of a rocket ship with Joel and Ellie and experiencing that, it was lovely.
So I think for me, the best video game moment of 2020 had to have been seeing Saints Row 3 completely remastered. It was just so cool to look at. Saints Row 3 is one of my favourite games. I love Saints Row in general anyway, but Saints Row 3 is where things started to just get really stupid and silly and funny, and it was just one of my favourite games to play. I didn't like 4 as much, so 3 and 2 were definitely my favourites, and being able to see that completely fully remastered and actually seeing the difference, looking at the pictures and seeing the difference and thinking like, yeah, that looks really, really good, but then physically going in and playing the game, from scratch all over again in its all remastered glory was just so pretty. And it's weird to say that about a game like Saints Row, where you can literally blow people up and eat people with shark guns that come out of the floor, and it's such a silly, stupid game, but it's also just really beautiful. The lighting's completely different and the visuals are different, and everything just seems so much more in-depth and realistic, and you don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, but it really, really did, and I loved it. I think I played it for like 3 days straight. I was completely obsessed again and just remembered how good of a game it really is, and just seeing it on something new, on this brand new console, it was just fun. It was just pretty and fun, and I don't think pretty has ever been a way to describe Saints Row 3, but yeah, it was really pretty, and I enjoyed it, and it made me happy, made me feel young and youthful again. Oh, I'm old.
Now this could just be full-on recency bias, however, I'm just going off sheer how giddy I was ability, giddiness of a thing, because my moment of the year came in Cyberpunk 2077. Now I'm not going to give away the specifics of it because you should experience it for yourself, but it does involve a scene where you, as whoever you are, gets to do a particular terrorist mission where you're going on this bombing run and you're going to go and do this thing. There's a big old deal in the Cyberpunk lore, at least it kicks off a lot of some things that happen in 2077. And whilst that game is, kind of on fire if you're playing on PS4 or Xbox One, and it does crash a lot on PS5, when it comes together, when all those characters can come together, when that world can come together, when it's controlling, it's keeping up with everything that you're doing because the gunplay is nice and weighty and it feels great when it comes together. That mission is just stupidly good, and I mean literally in a full-on subjective sense. Like, you have this cyberpunk backdrop, this whole sort of futuristic setting, neon lighting, this crazy almost Final Fantasy VII style intro bombing run adjacent thing, and they just put the cherry on the top by giving you access to a very specific melee move that lets you spew fire out one of your hands, alongside putting this thumping synthwave soundtrack underneath it. And it's just, I just sat there going like, this is absolutely brilliant. The gun that you have knocks dudes off their feet in one shot. It feels like one of those moments where everything that they've designed, everything that they've talked about from the power fantasy side of, the idea of giving into cyberpunk, modding your body and getting like mantis blades on your arms, and that sort of power fantasy side of cyberpunk mixed with that sort of 80s cheese, fun version of style where, like I said, neon lighting and all the different ways that characters are dressed and all the, cyber augments and things like that. Everything just comes together in that mission, and it's not very long, but it's such a high that I just couldn't get enough of it. Absolutely loved it, and thankfully my console didn't crash while I was playing through it, so hopefully that's the same for you and you could enjoy that as well.
So the best video game moment for me is probably a bit controversial to those who have played Doom Eternal over this year, and that is the Marauder boss fights. Just every single one of them. Even the first one that absolutely hands your ass to you in the art complex, which it did for basically most people unless you're really, really good at these games. I really enjoyed that. Overcoming the first Marauder boss fight, learning your rhythm as to how you take them down, which for me is ballista to the green eyes, super shotty, switch back to ballista if you're quick enough, do that 3 or 4 times and they're done. Once you manage to overcome a Marauder boss fight, there's no feeling quite like that. It's like overcoming a Souls boss, because it almost feels like a Souls enemy inside a Doom game, which is awesome. And then they keep turning up throughout the course of the campaign. They're there in the Slayer Gates, you get them in Ancient Gods, you get loads of them in the Ancient Gods, and of course you get the infamous double Marauder boss fight in the Ancient Gods Part 1. And every single time the Marauder came in, his portal appeared and he waltzes in, dragging his axe along the floor. Rather than feeling like I want to kill myself, I was there thinking, I am absolutely ready for you and I'm gonna kick your little ass. And I did. And there was nothing quite like that. They weren't suddenly easy, especially when they spawn in to a room already occupied with many, many demons, but just fighting them was always fun for me. Which is why it's controversial, because some people really, really don't like them. And I can understand that, but I personally just absolutely love them. So for me, the best moment of 2020 was overcoming the Marauder and then just having a great time kicking its ass throughout the rest of the Doom campaign and again in the Ancient Gods Part 1. And I'm hoping in Ancient Gods Part 2 we get a triple Marauder boss fight. I will take that. Just every DLC, everything that gets added to the game, just progressively give me more Marauders and we can see how many I can take down. Can one Doom Slayer-sized Rich take down 20 Rich-sized Marauders? Marauders are definitely taller than me. So yeah, that and also Half-Life Alyx's ending, which I've already talked about before, but that was just phenomenal. 2020 for me has been great for games, so I'm pretty happy.
My favourite video game moment of 2020 is actually one that I totally didn't see coming. It's Astrobot. It's a moment in Astrobot anyway. And even though this might not make my top 10 games of the year list, it gave me an emotional feeling that I just wasn't ready for. Even though Scott Tilford had been singing its praises while he was reviewing the PlayStation 5 and telling me that I needed to play it, I didn't expect it to hit me as much as it did, because it's essentially this big celebration not only of PlayStation but of video games as well. And it was the first time, I felt like I'd experienced the next generation, you know, picking up as Astrobot and having it, you know, use all the different aspects of the controller in a really interesting way. It made me incredibly giddy, but it was more seeing the references to other, you know, video games and different PlayStation consoles and different PlayStation, you know, add-ons and peripherals and stuff like that. And for the first 10 minutes, essentially, I'm just classing this in its entirety. The world was right. You know, we've all had a really crappy, terrible 2020. It's been the titty pits in the worst possible way. But for 10 minutes in Astrobot, everything was good, and I was a kid again, and I felt genuinely emotional, and I was welling up playing it, because I was like, this is such a love letter to the thing that we're all invested in. You know, if you're on this channel, chances are you like video games, and obviously us on the channel, we love video games. We all grew up with video games where we've invested so much of our time into it for a reason, because we have this emotional connection to it. And Astrobot felt like a payoff to that. So if I have to choose one particular moment, it was seeing the recreation of The Last of Us with Astrobot versions of Ellie and Joel. Like, I was just looking at that in motion, surrounded by all of this love for PlayStation. I thought, you know what? This is good. This is why we play video games, to make these connections, to make these memories, and to have them pay off in this way. It's something else, man. Like, anyone who has a PlayStation 5 needs to download this game, because you'll just have so much fun. So even though I loved other games like The Last of Us 2 or Ghost of Tsushima more than Astrobot as a whole, nothing quite hit me in that very specific way that Astrobot did.